see you all together again. My name is Ryan Henson-Creighton, and along with your friendly neighborhood IGDA volunteers, I'd like to welcome you to the first IGDA Toronto chapter event of 2014. Now you clap. Really excited. I always feel like, a really big shoe kind of thing. Really excited about what we got going on tonight. First, recognitions. I want to actually name our friendly neighborhood IGDA Toronto chapter volunteers. They are Leslie Fortoy, Danielle Engels, Emily Clarifan, Randy Orenstein, Alex Hayter, Justin Kwok, John Remedios, and me, Mr. Dress Up. Give them a hand if you would, please. It's nothing. If you need anything at all, ask them. If you need a 20 spot, they'll take care of that too. Danielle, I hear she's loaded. I'd also like to thank our sponsors up at the top, because that's where platinum sponsors go: Ubisoft Toronto, and then KPMG and George Brown College, and also the City of Toronto for providing this excellent space. Emmanuel Abdamon and Media's Law, Massive Damage, Big Viking Games, and the Academy of the Impossible. Thank our sponsors for me, would you please? We always like to open up our meetings with a few announcements about Toronto area events and game launches. We got a couple of exciting game launches to announce. The iPad spelling game. Who would ever build a spelling game? Foolish. Word Patch by Heavy Brew Games is now available on iOS. Astrodog by Wero Creative is also available on iOS, and a blast from the past, Cell Damage now has do you remember Cell Damage? Yeah, the cartoon car combat? Yeah, Cell Damage is now available from Finish Line Games on PS4, PS3, and Vita, and they launched today. Give them a hand. The end of the clapping, I promise. The events that are coming up, we've got the Toronto Global Game Jam 2014 Video Game Expo. That's on May 3rd at Bento Miso, starting at 6 p.m. We've got Kai Play, my mistake. It's spelled C-H-I. They call it Kai Play. Emily, any ideas why? No? No, what if she's just repping it. So what that is that's an international conference that's hitting Toronto in October, but right now they're doing like a call for speakers and panelists and presenters, so you can hit them up and present your thing to speak about. MG Research is doing a developer satisfaction survey in cooperation with the IGDA, and we put the link for that up on the event page, and I think where's Brandon? Is it also on the main page of these sites? Where'd you go? It's not even there. Okay. Yeah, is that a yes or a no? No, it's not. Just the event page, right? So once the event is done, it's lost forever. Correct? Yes, correct.
No, it's on the main page.
Oh, perfect. It's on the main page. So if you want to do a developer satisfaction survey, go nuts. Tonight we have a really cool thing. We're calling it a grab bag of developer chats. We have three amazingly talented and exciting speakers who just so happen, and believe me, this is a coincidence, to have spoken at GDC a couple months prior. I'm sure that their talks are nothing like the ones that they did at GDC contractually, but we're very fortunate to have them reprising some other talks they've given in the past, definitely not the GDC 2014 ones. First up, we have Teddy Lee, and I went to the GDC site to look up the bios of our speakers tonight. Again, completely unrelated to what's going on tonight. But Teddy's entire bio was born in Canada. Born in Canada, please welcome Teddy Lee from Cellar Games.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming to the talk today. My name's Teddy Lee, and I'm the game designer for Cellar Games. Anyways, today I'll be giving a post-mortem on our game, Rogue Legacy, with an emphasis on budget design. So for those who don't know, Rogue Legacy is a casual man's roguelike. So even though it's a really difficult game in a really difficult genre, we tried to make it more accessible by adding permanency to it. So every time you die, you get to spend the money you found upgrading your family tree. And when you die, your children succeed you. So to start, we consider ourselves to be a budget-oriented team. That means we focus more on gameplay rather than making these really expensive, beautiful worlds. And we have a preference for cheap and efficient choices. So being budget-oriented means that we're always on the lookout for really cheap, fast, reusable solutions. So we won't always implement the perfect solutions to things. We'll do imperfect design decisions as long as the cost savings are justified. So that means we'll never make the perfect game, and we're okay with that. So we've been doing this for a long time now. Together, my brother and I have made 8 games before we made Rogue Legacy. And on average, each of these games costs about $1,000 to make, with a development time ranging from 2 days to 3.5 months. The experience we've gained from these projects is really huge and helps solidify how we go about development. And we both worked at other game companies, and honestly, the experience we've earned from making these super tiny projects completely dwarfs anything we got from working at a small cog at a big company. So if you're looking to get into game development, you really should just start right now. It's hard to start on your own. Motivation is a big factor. So a lot of opportunities are out there, like ToeJam, which is coming up in 2 days. I think registrations are closed now, though. But these are the kind of things that you want to be looking out for. My brother and I actually, the first game we ever made was at ToeJam, and that was ToeJam in 1910 or something super. So this is the development timeline for Rogue Legacy. Initially, my brother is the sole person working on the project. I worked on the design side of things, but it was like super minor. I'd only put in at most 1 to 3 hours a week, and I only came on full time for the last 5 months. So everything else was him creating the engine, him creating the editor, and all of that stuff. At its largest, we had 5 people working on it. We had 1 programmer, 1 artist, and 1 designer, and 2 musicians. And everybody came on at really different periods of time. So this weird setup is an accidental. The graph above is kind of just a rough example of the raw man hours our projects usually take. If I were to work on the project full time, we just risk the danger of over design and project bloat. Because everything I do just exponentially increases programming, exponentially increases art. So having different disciplines, being able to ramp onto the project at different points of development really helps keep costs down. It's why I'm here right now and my brother isn't, because he's actually working on the next project. So this is Rogue Legacy by the numbers. Development time was 1.5 years, and in total the project was a little under $15,000. Within 1 week, we were able to, in the first hour, we were actually able to recuperate all our costs, and in 1 week, we were able to sell 100,000 copies. So we're super happy with it. Now, I don't want to misguide anyone because $15,000 seems really little. These costs are purely out of pocket. So it doesn't include our salaries, it doesn't include, how much we pay for living at home and stuff. Those costs are just kind of put on top of it. So we actually had in our savings more than $15,000. This is just what we had to pay off contracts and so forth. So yeah, in the end, our time's free. So whenever we could, we filled. So we did all of our own marketing, our own PR, our own customer service, QA. We even filled in for art and audio and a bunch of other stuff. And this meant we pulled in a lot of overtime. Especially near the end, we were putting in more than 120 hours a week. So I'm not advocating OT, but if you plan to break out on your own, you've got to be prepared for it. And when I say we're not paying ourselves a salary, it's because we knew coming into this, if this game didn't make any money, we wouldn't pay ourselves, right? So it's pointless. So to show how seriously we take budget, we got to talk about Rogue Legacy's beginnings. So originally, Rogue Legacy was never a roguelike. Instead, it was this mashup of 3 different games. So we had the death system of Dark Souls, well, a modified death system of it, platforming in Castlevania, and the cartography system from Etrian Odyssey. And there was nothing roguelike about it. It was just a totally different game which emphasized exploration and puzzle solving, and it was super massive in scope. So this is our first build. This was about 3 months into development. We called it Dark Souls 2D, which is why it's 2D. Okay, yeah. So we're just using Castlevania art. We just ripped that out because we didn't have an artist on hand. And it's hard to kind of see it because I didn't want to make a super long video. But this world is crazy massive. It takes more than 5 minutes just to walk from one end to the other. And it was full of enemies. We had 8 different enemies, 5 different mini bosses, and all of this content was made in a week. So everything before that was just setting it up, So we had this like super strong AI system and a super like efficient editor, which allowed us to make this content so quickly. This room here is just like the predecessor to the fairy chest room, if anybody's played it. In DS2D, we were going to intersperse these super high difficult areas, which are optional, which encourage backtracking without like forcing fake doors and stuff like that. This is the skeleton boss, if anybody like fought it before. So actually, a lot of content in this game would actually transition to the final. This is like a jump test room. This was part of the talk which I cut, but I didn't want to edit the video. So, anyways, at this point, like we were feeling pretty good because it was already starting to feel like a game, and that's kind of a hard thing to do, like get something to feel fun. So, you know, everything seemed really great, and we decided to do what like every other developer would do, and we killed the project. So, like at this point, we were better able to evaluate the cost to making this game, and you know, no matter how much we tried to cut or whatever, there was no way we were ever going to make this on budget. So we kind of went into salvage mode. So we had the basic 2D platforming engine, we had the AI logic system, and we had the room editor. So, you know, from there we were like trying to think of how to salvage everything, and we decided to just grab it and make a new game, which is what Rogue Legacy was. So procedurally generated rooms, which is what like the roguelike genre brings to our game, resolved our biggest bottleneck, which was art. And it opened up the strength of our tools, which was, you know, the super fast level editor that we had. So it's also a natural extension from Dark Souls 2D. Since a lot of the appeal to Dark Souls was its consequence upon death, and that's kind of similar to what Rogue Legacy has. So this is Rogue Legacy. This is 2.5 weeks after we scrapped this project. So we kind of went like all in on this. When we came up with the idea, we knew there was like the right direction to go. So we just like went balls to the walls with it. So right off the bat, like we're like, okay, this is the thing we're gonna do. We've got to make this game. So get rid of all of the, you know, stolen art and start putting in actual art. Except when you crouch, you turn into, you know, Belmont still. My brother made all the art. He made all the art for our other games, right? He had the style, but when we were like getting further and further into development, we're like, okay, yeah, this isn't gonna cut it. We've got to take more risks, and that's when we started hiring artists later on. And you can see that even though we were actually creating this to make it procedural link and everything, took only like a few hours. So a lot of the time we spent in this 2.5 weeks was adding new enemies and new zones, and, you know, creating stuff. It was pretty inefficient of us. And this guy just kind of gets stuck here. So because budget drives us, we tried to salvage as much as we could, and you know, so we were able to salvage everything, which was really lucky of us. And so this was about a year before we launched the game. We were able to launch so quickly despite like the major initial setback because we embraced this new direction and we didn't like try and hold back. So the challenges don't really end there. Because while we're working on a genre, we like to put on our own twists. So for Rogue Legacy, we want to make the casual roguelike that we said in the beginning, which meant changing some of the common tenets found in the roguelike genre. So the first thing we wanted to fix was the harsh punishment of death. In roguelikes, you know, a big part of the appeal is having that, you know, that fear of dying and losing all of your progress. And we want to go a different route. We want to actually make death fun instead of like painful. So we decided to add permanency to the game through the main or skill tree system. That way, when you died, all the money you found, you got to spend and upgrade your character, so you never had to start from scratch. And it was like a really contentious decision. You know, we talked back and forth on it, but you know, that's one of the big appeals of being an indie. You can take these big risks. So we also want to have the game have more skill and less chance. So a lot of roguelikes put emphasis on the roll of the dice. We didn't want any of that. We didn't want like players to go, oh, I rolled this and now I lose the game. So we took out every single like piece of chance in the game, except for a few instances where it's beneficial to the player, like critical strikes. We also want to reduce obscurity. So roguelikes go out of their way to obscure information. You can get like, you know, potions which are just colored, and then you kind of have to learn what they do and memorize that. We don't like any of that, so we have descriptions for virtually everything in the game. So some of them are flat out explained, and others we just hint at, but it's enough that when you use it once, you can remember again just from the little descriptor. we also wanted to make the games faster and shorter. So this was also in part making the game easier, which I guess is counterintuitive, because to make it faster, we just amped the difficulty significantly. So the average lifespan was like 1 minute. So if you die a lot in this game, it's totally fine. It was designed that way. But these short lives meant that you weren't losing as much progress. It let us streamline the whole experience, and yeah, sorry, forgot to speed up a bit. We also removed floor clearing from the game. So if you've played a bunch of roguelikes before, going straight to the boss is actually a fail scenario. You actually have to go and clear out everything around the boss so that you level up, and then you get to fight the boss at the optimal power play. We didn't like that. That kind of removes all choice from the player. So we removed any type of character advancement until you died and started over from the beginning again. So it's actually optimal to go straight to the boss if you wanted to. So this is our last point. This was actually the first decision that was made for Rogue Legacy, and it was the one that got me excited the most. And it's our game loop. Now, game loop might actually mean something, but I don't know. It's just what we called it. And the biggest change was that we put the RPG mechanics after death, but before you started the game again. So that removed all the hassle of oh, I'm leveling up. You can press pause during a play, and then modify your character or whatnot. It ruins the flow, and you can't really control when the player is going to do that. In optimal scenarios, you're always doing it every 5 minutes in those type of games. So just saying, we're going to take the whole RPG system and put it in its own condensed area, which you cannot kind of sequence break, I guess. Really just fixes a lot of things. And all of our design decisions here kind of just are used to resolve around this. So this is our alpha. Now, I'm a little bit out of time, so I'm going to just fast forward through it. So more or less, this is the final game, just with worse art. And the things I want to show is you saw the title screen where it's new, load, and everything. Because we're really emphasizing the flow of the game, we put in a lot of time and redid that entire intro sequence with just a single button click, which caused a lot of problems later on because not having a menu system is pretty annoying. And we just we added the fairy chest rooms, we added the zones, and we wanted to have everything in our game, which our game has, except we didn't have the trade system, and we didn't have the guy taking all your money at the very beginning of the game, which are the two most fundamental aspects of Rogue Legacy. The reason we didn't do that is because technically they're really easy to do. Everything else in the game was complicated, right? Getting the rooms to link together, getting the zones, getting enemy scaling and all that. So we're let's just keep pushing it back. And then when we submitted it to the IGF, they're oh yeah, it's a kind of cool Castlevania game, but it's nothing special. So that was a big mistake on our part. And I'm just gonna stop this video. Oops. Okay. So we were pretty strict with budget to every game we made. Rogue Legacy is no different. But we did come up with a fair bit more experience. So these were a few key tips that we tried to follow. The first is autonomy. Work with people who can be independent. This is really important for a small indie team because everyone's going to wear multiple hats. And it's really tough to micromanage people. And if they're making mistakes, they need to be able to fix it on their own. You can't constantly have it coming back and then you're telling them, oh, you got to change this, and it goes back to them. They got to be able to be independent. But this has implications, right? This means that our development process isn't very democratic. Opinions matter, but when it comes down to it, the most trust is placed in the expert, and it's not decided by vote. So a good example of this is our artist, Glaber Kotaki. We originally had 2 artists, one which was doing backgrounds and one which was doing character sprites. And it wasn't working, the styles wouldn't mesh. So in the end, we actually, Glaber stepped up and said he'll try to do it. He never did backgrounds before, and especially not to this scale. But he was confident that he'd take the crack at it. And so this is what he was able to do in a faster amount of time than what the artist was able to do. So it's he really helped save us a lot of time and a lot of money. Budget-wise, it's really crucial to work with these kinds of people because we didn't catch on early enough. And 20% of our entire budget was actually spent hiring and trying out different artists to try and resolve this problem. The second rule, this one's a little more iffy, is to make the editor for the game and not the company. So the reason for that is this map editor for roguelikes can only do one thing. It can make rooms. It's super rigid, and it only took about 2 weeks to make because we knew what it had to do, so we didn't have to add on all these flourishes and stuff. And tweaks came on afterwards, but the bulk of the work was, within that time frame. What's really great about this is that we can create and bug test a room in as little as 5 minutes. So Rogue Legacy, when it launched, had 351 rooms. I only spent about 2 weeks making all of that content. So there won't be much that we can salvage from this. In fact, we're probably going to throw it all out. But that time saved is just astronomical compared to the amount of code lost. We also say always have design alternatives. So this ties in with what we mentioned at the beginning of the talk, where we always look for cheap, fast, and reusable solutions. So it's usually necessary to have multiple ideas to find one that fits the resources that you have. So for those who don't know, the lineage tree is like the character selection. You get to pick your characters, and when you die, you got to see your whole family. So the original concept was this gigantic family tree, and you got to see parents and whatnot, and it was really cool, like the light prototype that we had, but it was crazy expensive, and to polish it off was going to be even more expensive. So instead, we just switched to the lineage line, which just showed the child you picked, and that just saved like hundreds of hours for something that was more like a garnish. So another quick example of this is the skill tree. For those who've played the game, when you purchase a skill, everything kind of goes up in price, and it's a little annoying. Our original system was just you purchase a skill, and only that skill went up in cost, which was like, that's actually a good way to do things. But the problem was the optimal build which would happen from this is you just max everything equally, right? You put 10 points into health, and then, I can't afford it anymore because I'm not good enough. Then you just put 10 points into strength and so forth. So, we didn't want that. We wanted player choice. So in the end, we decided to use that skill modifier. So with that skill modifier, players now had to optimize where they're going to go into. So players had a decision of becoming a tank or becoming a fighter and so forth. So that was our solution. The cons to it was it felt bad, more punishing towards casual players, because if you didn't know anything and you just got to win everywhere, you'd be really screwed later on, until you got like a lot better. And the fix is apparent, and what I mean by this is that everybody who's playing the game, they can see this weirdness, so they'll go into the forum, they'll talk to you and say, why did you have this, just remove it, it's such an obvious thing to cut, right? But if you cut it, you lose all of that kind of characterization. But the pros was that it was a $0 solution. And a $0 solution is something that we use to when we don't need art, we don't need audio, we don't need anything, right? It's just some background numbers, and it took less than 10 minutes to add, and it fixed the problem for us, right? So it's like, whatever, we had better solutions, but they're more expensive, and this was just like way too easy to pass. So it kind of encompasses our design mantra of good but not perfect. So this is just a small quickie thing. We made games before, but we've never had to market them. And we knew going into this, we had to kind of take on that role. So a lot of people recommend going to things like PAX and stuff, but that's really expensive. Like, you've got to rent out the room, you've got to dress it up, you've got to fly to the event, and we don't have that money. So all we had was a trailer that we could make. And fortunately for us, our oldest brother, he went to film school, so we kind of stepped in and he was like, yeah, I'll help you make this trailer. So this was really helpful for us because since it was all done in-house, we could kind of see the statistics and improve upon our mistakes. So our first trailer, we actually tried to kill two birds with one stone. And that was, we had to get through Steam Greenlight. And so for those of you who don't know, Steam Greenlight is the approval process to get onto Steam, and it's voted by the community, and it's really brutal. They've changed it now, so it's a lot easier, but before there were thousands of games that were waiting, and they would only let 8 to 12 a month. So in other words, people were there since the very beginning, so 4 years on, and they can't get through. So we knew we had to kind of put a lot of effort into getting into this. So we had 3 goals: show why we're special, get us through Steam Greenlight, and keep it short, because we wanted it to be commercial, and we wanted other sites to pick it up. And if it was like a Kickstarter video, people won't be as interested. So I don't have time to show the video, but you can see them all on YouTube if you want. These are the statistics. This is the audience retention rate, which more or less means how many people are watching the video before they close it. And people are really, like, they have no patience. So in the end, we fulfilled all our goals of the trailer. We're really happy with it. It was 1:39 in length, and it garnered about 112,000 views in the first 3 days. So like, we're like super happy, like this is great, right? But that wasn't the case, because if you look at the graph, you can actually see that when we conveyed the major twist to our game, that was at the 23-second mark, which we saw was like really quick. But only 68% of people who were watching the trailer bothered to stay at that point. So massive drop. And even worse, when we get to the Steam greenlight part, we're like, oh, please vote for us. Only 48% of people were watching. So like, we knew we could do way better than this. So these are this is our greenlight like voting process. Ignore that little yellow thing that's all messed up because there's a bunch of bugs in the Steam greenlight. So in the first 3 days, we got 14,000 votes, which is awesome, but that meant only 12.5% of people who saw the trailer bothered to vote for us, and it's actually a lot less than that because we got picked up by sites like Rock, Paper, Shotgun and Kotaku and everything, and they were linking to our site as well. So, you know, if we made a better trailer, we could have gotten through greenlight a lot faster. It actually took us a month and a half to go through that, and you can see, like, the people voting for us, it drops off after 1 day. Like, nobody cares about your game. You need to constantly be advertising it. So in that month and a half, we were solely marketing our game and production stopped. So that was like a really huge hit to us. And if we did a better job with the greenlight in the first place, we would have, like, you know, saved 30 days or something. So for our launch trailer, we wanted to fix all of our mistakes. So we had one goal in mind, to just make everything fast. So in the end, flow-wise, it's practically the same because we liked the way the information was kind of traveling across. We even used the same jokes, although we kind of remixed them. And our launch trailer ended up being 1:12 in length, so 27 seconds faster than our first. And we were able to get our hook for our game at the 10-second mark, which was 13 seconds faster. And that slight time difference meant that we had a 79% audience retention rate by the time we showed our twist, which was a massive spike compared to our previous one. And you know, we learned from our mistakes. It really paid off, and this trailer ended up being a huge success for us. And it was one of the big reasons that our game had such a strong launch. So yeah, marketing is super important. So you know, where do we go from here? We're now financially stable. A lot of these budget stuff that we're doing is probably not necessary. So you know, would we still do these things? And the answer is that we most likely will. There's more to just saving money. You know, finding simple solutions to big problems is useful in any scenario, and we often surprise ourselves with the things that we can come up with. So it's also, for us, it's like the most entertaining part of development when you're given limited resources to fix these problems. So we're probably just going to, you know, keep at it. Anyways, that's it. You know, thanks for everybody for attending.
You may want to ask Teddy questions, but I say nay. The reason is this: we're on a tight time schedule, and as usual, we're going to meet for a social after this. Tonight, we're meeting in a new place, the Charlotte Room. Hopefully, some of you know it's a place with tons of pool tables. It's just sort of over here, not directly across the street. Some of you are looking, oh, this is really close. It's over there, I guess. Yeah. So the Charlotte Room is over there. Emily is waving some sort of stick at me. Oh, does he need that? Oh, would our next speaker, who's about to be announced, like a button-changing device? Yeah, that's a thumbs up, yeah. Our next speaker has been in the industry for 6 years as a designer and an artist. He took a course up at Seneca College, which he describes as subpar, which led him to actually graduate and apply to be a teacher there and fix what he thought was wrong with it, so that's very noble. He's worked at 4 different studios, working on games that didn't launch. But thankfully, he has launched one game, Flip's Twisted World, that was out for the Wii, and a game you might have heard of, Splinter Blacklist, which was out for the Everything. Please welcome our next speaker, Dan Cox.
There we go. Oh, hi.
Hi there.
Gotta keep it smooth. Hi, I'm Dan Cox. I'm going to talk to you guys about what modern interior design teaches us about environment art. Cough right in there. Oh wait, it doesn't work. Am I going the wrong way? I am. You can't go back. So I work at Ubisoft Toronto, and I worked on Splinter Blacklist. During most of my career, I've also actually been teaching at Seneca College, teaching people about game art and how to get into the industry. But while I'm there, oftentimes I've had a hard time understanding how people's work looks so bad. There'd be situations in which they'd create a scene and I wouldn't be able to articulate why it was bad, what was actually causing the problems with it, and why it didn't work. I would come up with cliche solutions, such as like, I would make it more blue, add more detail. But none of them really got to the heart of the problem. Although the scenes would turn out well in the end, I didn't feel like there was a clarity as to how we would get there. But during this time, I was watching HGTV with my wife. And watching these shows were really interesting because they would take spaces like this and turn them into something like this. And the whole while, they'd explain all the details as to why one space works and another space doesn't. They would explain why the dark cabinets make everything smaller and make everything seem, contained and claustrophobic. Just the order of the elements in the room make the flow problematic. And by actually making certain elements the same material, you tie them together so that a person understands that their function ends up being the same, or at least contains their function. Which made me think, this seems really similar to what we do in games, and the kind of things that we want from games. We lead people around, we try to evoke certain emotions, and there were a lot of rules that were being established in it. So where do we go from here? Well, first off, I want to talk about the interior design tips, rules, and tricks that I've often seen either in blogs or on HGTV itself, or just other various things to derive some specific ideas from, and then apply these to game spaces. So first off, rules. We're going to talk about lighting, balance, emphasis, contrast, rhythm, repetition, proportion and scale, and we'll first start with lighting. We're not going to talk about lighting. It's too big. It's a huge talk in and of itself that contains way too many things for me to get into. And for games, we actually kind of deal with lighting a lot anyways. Oftentimes we actually define a space mostly through lighting, and we lead players through a space mostly through lighting. But we have way more tools than that. Specifically, when it comes to lighting with interior designers, the light source ends up being something that's actually one of the most interesting things in a room, which I always find really, really interesting. First off, it's the highest point of contrast in a space. So immediately people are going to look at it, and all of these rooms are potentially rather boring. But the light sources create a lot of character and a lot of design to the space and make it interesting. Next, we can talk about contrast. Contrast is what's going to lead you around the room very clearly and help define the function of a space regardless of the elements that are in it. In this example, we can see that we've got a room with a TV, if anybody can see it at the back, and they probably can't. Nope. But we've got a room with a TV and a couch. Now, however, if we change the contrast of the room, removing no elements, but simply darkening the wall in the back, suddenly the room doesn't seem like a TV room anymore, but instead a lounge. All just by changing contrast. This leads us to emphasis. Emphasis is going to be the specific time thing that brings you around a room. Contrast is used within this, but there can be loads of different ways that you bring out emphasis and the way emphasis is done. So in these spaces, we're obviously drawn to specific elements of the room based on their color. In these spaces, we have a situation where the function of the space is defined by its emphasis. So we've got a table which has a high amount of contrast from the rest of the elements, making it the focal point because it's the most important part of the room. It's a dining room. Then we've got another room where you're supposed to sit and lounge, and the chairs end up being one of the most noticeable elements because they draw the most emphasis. In this space, what we often don't think about in games, because we often look at movies or illustrations or photography for our compositional ideas. We don't think about three-dimensional composition, but in specifically three-dimensional games, you've got to look all around yourself. So two-dimensional composition doesn't always work. In this room, we have a problem of emphasis. We've got too much emphasis on one side of the room, the bed, and a lot less emphasis on the other side. By balancing that out, you create a room that has multiple focal points all around that works a lot better for the space. Balance. This is symmetrical balance. Symmetrical balance is going to be calming. It's going to cause a little bit of rigidity, but it can make you feel really, really peaceful and at ease. It can also lead a player or a person through a space as opposed to around it, where asymmetrical symmetry comes into effect. Asymmetrical symmetry can lead you about a space. So you're not just walking through it, but you're exploring quite a bit more. It also can tend to be a little bit chaotic if it's overdone, if you have too much asymmetry. Repetition. One of the things that I love that interior designers do is deal with repetition. Specifically, in the first example, all of the colors in the room, you can see the colors in there, that's good. The colors in the room are all derived from one object, the painting. The painting in this room defines the color scheme for the entire place. Every single object derives its color scheme from that one initial piece. That's found first, and everything comes from it. In these other pictures, it's a number of elements that are all put together. The only tying element between all of them is color. Their shape and form is entirely different between many of these different elements, but because their color remains the same, they still work. Repetition ties everything together and keeps that through line working. The same thing can be done for these. These objects, their shape and form is different, but because their color is the same and their general theme, they still work together. In this room, what might be a space that may not be visually pleasing for some people, it's still visually successful, in the sense that there's a consistency of form as opposed to color. Their form ends up being all rectangular and bold, and that makes the space all work together, because most of the forms retain that element. Rhythm, I like to think of this as gradients. So you can start with lower cabinets or darker colors lower down, and you can lead to something lighter above. Now this can be in shape, form, color, anything like that. In this space, we have dark lower elements, light higher up elements, to create that gradient and that leading element through the room. We also have a shape change as elements get thinner and smaller as we go up as well. So a value and a shape change that causes some of the rhythm. These are two good examples, and this is a bad one. There's very little rhythm in this space, which makes it really hard to kind of move your eye through the area. Proportion and scale. Interior designers deal with proportion and scale in a lot of interesting ways. First off, if you have a small space, a lot of times interior designers will have elements that have a lot of through lines through it. Areas where you can see through elements. It's why glass objects will be used. I don't like glass objects, I think they look ugly. That's me. But the fact of the matter is you can see through those elements, and they take up less visual space. Whereas if in this situation, those elements become bigger, it makes the space feel a lot more claustrophobic. The same kind of rule needs to be applied to a large space. Big elements need to be used in it to make sure that the space feels not too empty, like this one. The elements for this space are actually a little bit too small for the space itself. So you end up in a situation where it seems like a vast, vast room just because proportion and scale are a little bit confusing. We adjust these elements, and the space suddenly ends up feeling a lot more cozy and comfortable than it did before. We can also start looking at interior design tips and techniques. A lot of these you can find on just blogs and interior design websites, as opposed to really complex college educations. First off, one that I like is don't fight the architecture. In game development, oftentimes we might be given a level design from someone that might not work for what we need to do. We might want to change a bunch of things on the art side, but that's expensive and difficult to do and upends a lot of things. So in some situations, it's best to not fight the architecture. If the ceiling is too high in this situation, instead of just lowering the ceiling, there's a number of things we can do artistically. Adding in some crown molding is going to lead our eye a little bit down and make the room not feel quite as tall. It's going to ground the space a little bit more. If we add paintings to the top, we end up in a situation where now our eye is actually appropriately being led up, and then we're making use of that space. It doesn't make the space feel as tall anymore. I'm going to say space 100 times. Next, we can add in valence beams. The valence beams are really interesting because they're going to keep our eye down and create an artificial ceiling height while still maintaining the skylight that we have and allowing light to go in. But by making sure that it's not the same color as the table below, we keep the attention on the floor and where the big table is, which is the most important part of the room. Next, the 30-60-10 rule, which you get dominant color, which takes up 60% of the room, and intermediate color, which takes up 30%, and is quite a bit more saturated, and then bold pops of color for your 10% of the room. You could have 2 colors or more for this, but this is where you get a situation where you get an even distribution of color saturation, and the room can feel quite pleasing. It's just a nice setup for your color schemes. And on top of this, you can get the same kind of techniques for suits and other elements outside of interior design. Next, applying this to games. So first off, I wanted to grab some screens from Dishonored. Do we have, oh, that's so dark. Can we lower the lights a little? Because I'm going to load up Splinter Cell stuff, and Splinter Cell is made of darkness. Oh. It's okay, you guys don't need to see it. Yeah, I'll shoot them. That's the best, that's fine. You guys don't need to see pictures. I can see it, it's great. So what we have, you can kind of see it, it's pretty good. The Splinter Cell ones are going to be invisible, like they should be. We've got a scene from Dishonored. Now these scenes are great, but what if we have a situation in which it doesn't work so well? In which the space gets a little too tall. By changing some of the crown molding, we end up with a room that actually doesn't quite work the way that we would want. The room starts feeling a little bit taller than it's supposed to, and we lose some of that sense of scale. However, with some subtle changes, there we go, you can see them. With some subtle changes to rhythm, we can end up making the space feel a lot more appropriate and gain some of that scale back in, and just lead the eye through the space a little bit more. Next, we could use some of the elements of the 30-60-10 rule. Add pops of color into the room to just lead the eye around the space a little bit more and create a bit of a broader color scheme. And then on top of that, if we wanted to lead the eye back down a little bit more, create a consistency. Taking the lights themselves and putting them on a consistent point of the walls ends up leading our eye down a little bit more and allowing us to have a little bit better sense of that proportion in the room. And comparing back with the original version, a lot of these are subtle, simple changes, but I think that's why they're so powerful. Next, we can look at Splinter Cell. Oh, yeah, it's so dark. And these are like, I made them bright. I knew this was going to happen. So hopefully we'll be able to see some of this, if we can. And the area that I was working on was a Louisiana fuel refinery. In this area, it's not supposed to be a design space. This is not supposed to be interior design. You're not supposed to think of it in that way. In fact, because we ignored any design elements for so long, people got confused. When they were trying to play through the level, they would try to grab onto every surface because it's all horizontal grabbing objects and girders and things. And people didn't know where to go. And so we ended up having to revise and work with these things. And we still ended up with something that had more color in the end, but I wanted to examine how these areas could still be affected by using more of these kinds of rules. So first off, in this area, you start here, you move up to the stairs, you climb the stairs up to this platform above, you look out to see a bunch of nasty terrorists, you can go back and climb down this pipe. So I wanted to start with this first area and look at maybe adding a little bit more rhythm into the space. Oh my god, it's so dark. Trust me, it looks better. By darkening out the floor, we're going to lead our eye back up. There's nothing useful to the floor in this situation, as much as it just looks interesting. But if we darken it out quite a bit more, we can lead the eyes up, which is where people are supposed to be moving anyways. By also simplifying some of the elements, by simplifying some of the elements as well, we lead players to not think that they have to interact with that stuff. We also just allow ourselves to focus on important elements and just simplify the visual space. I also wanted to add in some symmetry into the space. By repeating some of the paneling on the one wall, I'm actually going to lead the player through a space a little bit more than we were before. The player doesn't need to move about this area. They've got 2 paths. We might as well move them through those by creating a small amount of symmetry so that the space doesn't get too chaotic. Next, we move to this area, repeating the same things I've done before, darkening out the floor, creating that symmetry, simplifying some complex elements, lowering that contrast. By also doing something a little bit more interesting with the light fixtures, we create a situation in which those end up being a design element, which tell us more about the place. Next, a really impossible to see variation of just creating a little bit more of a movement and a little bit more of a rhythm in the space that you can't see. And comparing. Next, we head up to the higher area, which you should be able to see better. That's good. And we end up in a situation in which, again, because it just works so well and it's so simple, darkening out the floor. By darkening the floor, we lead the eye back up. We can also start creating some green lines and elements of that symmetry to lead the eye through the space again, by creating some of that rhythm and some of that emphasis. Next, simplifying some of these elements, because we don't need to see through these, because it's just going to create more contrast and more emphasis that we don't want. Next, removing some of these pieces and simplifying them, because again, they're drawing up too much contrast, and that is actually not an interactive area over there. People aren't supposed to go to this space that you can't see. And I do add in some simple other elements that are a little bit more obvious to see, or a little bit simpler, so that the contrast isn't so heavy. On top of that, if we need to lead players to certain elements a little bit more, you can barely see that, then we end up in a situation in which you can lead the player to a space with very simple rules. Normally we were using big black and yellow chevrons to lead people to certain spots, which is really heavy-handed and ends up having the mirror's edge quality, which, although mirror's edge is beautiful, is constantly telling you where to go and what to do, and you don't really, you can feel the designer's hand in those situations very heavily. So by being able to use some more of these rules, you can subtly hint towards areas without having to outright do black and white chevrons and tell people, climb this, which is what we used. Again then, adding in some of the light sources, just to create a specific grounding element, and just some interesting contrast. You are supposed to move around this area, so it's a great spot to lead the person to. And simplifying a couple smaller elements. All of these rules are still applicable to organic spaces, places that were never supposed to be built by hand in the first place. Because all of it is just emphasis, contrast, and color and rhythm. It's all simple, fundamental elements, but we can get them from interesting sources. In closing, we can look to interior design for inspiration, for a better understanding of our goals and intentions in the spaces that we're trying to create, and for some history and trying to understand how we got to this point of decorating a place in a certain way. We decorate various other types of places that don't exist, but we still need to follow those same fundamental ideas. And educational accessibility. I learned so much of this stuff just by watching some entertaining TV shows. That's really awesome to me, that anybody can kind of get some of this information really quickly and easily. To learn more, we don't really want to use games or movies. Games are going to be using a lot of the same cliched ideas that I was getting my ideas from. And movies are two-dimensional designs. Unless you have a game that's entirely linear and is always focusing on two-dimensional shots, you don't want to use movies. It's not effective necessarily for what you need to create. But things like HGTV and shows like Sarah 101 or Pure Design are two shows specifically that I watched that I gained a lot of information on. They're very theory heavy and very fundamentals heavy, which is really useful, and they're just fun to watch. Interior design blogs that are useful, Fresh Home, Decor8, Home Design Find, and Apartment Therapy are also great places that you can look at. Websites that have pictures of houses or interiors from multiple angles, not just singular shots. And all of this stuff in the end can be really, really useful for us, regardless of the type of space that we're making. They give us the fundamental rules with which to ground our ideas in, and to understand when we want to break, retain, or just entirely do something different with any of those specific ideas. Thanks.
All right, do we like design talks? Yes. Yes, I think we like design talks. Ryan, some of you say to me, you say, Ryan, I wish there was a way that I could tell you more of what I like. I wish there was a way I could project to you and the IGDA committee the kinds of talks I would like to see. Why, in fact, hypothetical person, there is a way for you to do that, and you're sitting on it. It's beneath your butt. Danielle went around and posted surveys to your seats before you came in, and if you'd like to hear more design talks or you'd like to get anything else off your chest to the committee, we really do go through all of these, and a fortunate volunteer every single. Who's doing our surveys this meeting this month? Brandon is. Thank you, Brandon, so much. So Brandon's going to actually parse all the data in our surveys, and we actually go through it, and we actually look at your responses, and somebody actually types up. If you put something in the comment box, like I'm Batman, somebody often gets typed up, so that stuff's happening. We already got the note about the lights. Thanks, you don't have to add that, of course. A bunch of wise asses in the room already will. I'm going to ask our next speaker to come up and get his presentation going before I introduce him, if that's cool. But while he slowly makes his way up here, Charlotte Room, one more talk until the Charlotte Room where there's beer. If you don't imbibe, we do have a bevy of beverages, some fructose-based sodas on the side of the room, along with some fancy cakes. These are all catered for us by the City of Toronto, who also provided this lovely space. The City of Toronto. So yeah, if you wanted to just like, this is a great time to maybe sidle over and grab a little snack cake, you know what I'm saying? And by snack cake, I mean snack cake. Our next speaker, standing right to my right, your left, has been at Ubisoft since 2006. 2006, and he's been at Ubisoft Toronto since 2010. Look, I memorized his bio. Very, very cool. So when he joined Ubisoft Toronto, he became the lead game designer on Splinter Cell Blacklist. And guys, he's launched so many games. Like so many games. He's worked on Rayman, Raving Rabbids 2, he's worked on Tom Clancy's Endgame, Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell Conviction, aforementioned Blacklist. I'm getting all these right? He's not like horses, pets with his head? No, neither of those. Those are not him, just the cool ones. And what's really interesting about our next speaker, our final speaker of the evening, is that he has not one, but two educations. That's two educations. His first education is in game design, and his second education is in industrial product design. Very, very interesting. So please welcome, ready to go? Everybody got their snack cakes? Looking good? Please welcome our last speaker of the evening, Laurent Malville.
Thank you. Thanks everybody. Wow, a great introduction. I think it's the best I've ever had. Thanks, Ryan. So yeah, my name is Laurent Malville, and I'm going to show you a bit what we did in Splinter Cell Blacklist to teach players how to play stealth. So as Ryan was saying, I joined Ubisoft Toronto in 2010 as lead game designer on Splinter Cell Blacklist. So the mandate we had at the time when we arrived with the small team was to build on Conviction strengths with the choice in mind, and all of that to create the biggest Splinter Cell ever. It wasn't as solid and formalized as that in the beginning, but in a nutshell, this is where we ended up after a couple of weeks. So we worked hard, we had tons of meetings, of decisions, and we ended up adding in the base we were working on in Conviction, adding tons of new systems like character customization, like more weapons, more gadgets, creating new enemy archetypes, reworking some mechanics we had like the mark and execute and everything. And so after several months, we ended up having that massive scope, and we passed our gates, our internal gates at Ubisoft. And slowly bigger problems arrived. So with the early playtest arriving, here's what happened. Players were playing stealth and they were having fun with the game. They liked it when we were asking them to rate the game at the end of their play session, and they were rating the stealth like a great deal. So which is like the great deal, which is awesome for us. It's a stealth game, it's excellent. On the combat side, they were rating the game a bit less well. And after digging through the results we had in the playtest database and everything, slowly we started to understand that like the more players were playing stealth, the more they were having fun with the game, and the more they were not getting the stealth and just playing combat well, they were having less fun with the game. It seems pretty basic, but this was our analysis. So this led us to formalizing in a sentence our problem. We have a huge scope with this game, and we have a very short amount of time to teach players how to play stealth in that game before they start losing interest and just gun blaze everything they see around. So we kind of came back to the basic, and we started to list everything we had at our disposal to teach players. So you'll see there's nothing really crazy there. It's pretty basic stuff, but still it was a good exercise. So we have the center tutorial text. pretty simple to do. We have small tutorial box that we can pop up on the side. We had the character customization system interface, so we could punch text in there depending on the gadget or item you're in. We could freeze and force the player to perform a desired action, which is definitely not our preferred one, but you'll see ultimately how we had to come to there. We have the level design setting, like having a level design setting that strongly invites or encourages a certain playstyle. We have the voiceover from the team member. You know, in Blacklist, if you're not familiar with it, you have a team supporting you in your missions. And there's no sound. So at this point, you should hear Charlie telling you, cranking it up, but it doesn't work.
Jiggle?
Smoke will help with situation awareness while keeping bad guys off balance.
Okay, I'm going to do it one more time.
It's all enemy territory. Smoke and sticky cans will help with situation awareness while keeping bad guys off balance.
So yeah, so that kind of a voice cue was encouraging player to. This is a tool that we could use. It takes time though. You have to order it to the narrative designers. You have to get the actor in, and even if you can use a placeholder, it's never as efficient as the proper actor playing it. We had also contextual systemic tutorial coming from Conviction, so definitely a great tool. Loading tips, very cheap to do. And this is what we have. So tonight I'm going to focus on 3 examples of how we use those things into the tutorial of the game. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the beginning of the game, so the core of the experience. Then I'll go over the problem we had with the gadgets. The gadgets, it's Splinter Cell at its best. And the Mark and Execute, which is our flagship feature, I'll go through the problem we had with that. So the beginning of the game. So we started by listing all the abilities we wanted player to master at the end of the first level. So we had navigation, of course, crouch, climb over, carry body, selection wheel, nothing crazy up to there, cover to cover, abduction, active sprint. It was a new feature we had. You just hold A and you go through the environment, so pretty cool. And we were showing also an exotic interrogation gameplay there, and a bit of shooting to conclude a big exploding end of the first mission. So obviously that didn't seem like a lot at the time, but that was really a lot. Here's what it was looking like at the beginning. So it's even worse than that, I think. So as you can see, yeah, we were prompting you to crouch. You had to crouch because there was a tree blocking your way. You had to remain crouched because there's another tree coming. Suddenly we were showing you how to climb. Going on like this. Down to drop down. There's going to be another climb after that. Then we were bringing back everybody. It wasn't in Conviction, we were bringing that back, so we were super happy to bring that back for the fans, so we were like, we have to put it in the beginning of the game, of course. And so the fun begins. So you had to carry somebody, follow somebody for a very long time. Couldn't go left or right, or going straight. Then you were arriving there, you had to drop that body. So obviously, like, the idea was to wrap that in a narrative context and make it that you're also following a story, but like. And then you could also look around with your right stick, always important to know. And then you were doing a bit of hand-to-hand, and it was going on. Then it was going to the cover and cover to cover. And some abduction after that, and the exotic interrogation gameplay that I talked to you about. So the problem were pretty obvious there. It's like players are too constrained. It's not fun at all. It's like you can't do anything else than what we were telling players to do. So players, like the result of that is just that players were not learning how to play at all. They were just following a bunch of actions that are prompt to do. And even worse than that, there was no room for experimentation at all. It was just a succession of action without any context for the gameplay. You've seen that, like, you crouch to go under a tree. Well, you never do that at any moment in the game. So that was, those are the problems we really got from that. The thing is that it was kind of our fault. We started strong with that, being like very like, here are our gameplay blocks, we want players to go with that, and we had a result pretty fast, and then we had like the rest of the scope of the game to take care of and other maps, so we didn't touch that for a long time, and when we came back look at this, at the game being more defined, like we were like, oh my god, what have we done? And also on top of that, we had other technical issues with the jungle and vegetation things, so it was problematic in its whole. So we went back to the core for that, and going back to the core, it came down to like putting on paper what was the most important thing we wanted players to go away, to take away from the first map. So the first thing was navigate stealthily using cover and cover to cover. If there was one thing that we wanted players to master at the end of that first level, it was really that. Like, whatever, if they forget everything else, like camera and navigation, they can just move the stick and they'll figure it out. But those two things are really the specialties that we want, the special things that we want player to master at the end of the first level. The second one was avoid the light to stay unseen from the enemies. It was more a tier 2 of a thing, but still it was something important. And then we had perform abduction moves when necessary. So from 11 abilities, we went down to 8, which doesn't seem a lot, but like when it comes to memory load and the amount of info that you can take, it's quite efficient. So we had navigation, of course, crouch, light and shadow, cover to cover, using the selection wheel quickly, and abduction. But keep in mind that our priorities were also putting priorities in those 8 abilities. So we didn't have a lot of time, so we did kind of a quick paper and toy prototype just to, I ran through Dollarama this day, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna buy soldiers, and this is what we did. Cool, it's working. So there's no sound on this one. So you were starting with a bit of a follow me and basic navigation, not for too long. The helicopter was crashing, and you were following us, so you can see there. The result of that, obviously, there's been a lot of iteration because this is what we shipped with, but there's been a lot of iteration with that, but you can see that somehow there's a connection between that paper prototype and what we shipped. So we're starting with just basic navigation. It's in context because, well, you've been crashing with an helicopter, so it kind of makes sense that you're just walking slowly and everything. Then there was an explosion, there was an event arriving there, an explosion, and you're gonna see, so there's like 2 guards that are gonna come there to kill those dudes that were trying to escape, and they're gonna kind of search the place there. So we were telling you to use left stick to crouch, and we're telling you also what it's doing, like it's reducing your sound and visibility. So after that, we had a little moment that was not super defined in the paper prototype, but eventually it became just explanation about your light, the light flaring on your gear when you're hidden in the shadow. Then we had a bit of abduction there. Reminder for the selection wheel. And then after that, the big thing was the playground for cover to cover and abduction. And that was the biggest part. At this point, you were completely free, and you had a mini sandbox map to experiment and do whatever you wanted. So and that part was the part that we're totally missing in the previous level we had. So it worked pretty well for us. We had, like I said, there's been a lot of iteration on that, but it worked pretty well. And what it told us is that in our case, the first map had to be about the core of the experience. We were getting too sidetracked by introducing Sam and by trying to make players play at the best as fast as possible. It had to be about the core of the experience and what we think is the best of the game we're making. And anything else was just misleading players about what the game is really about. So that was really our big learning. The second example that I'm going to talk to you about is the gadgets. So the problem we have with the gadgets is that we have 13 gadgets in the game. And in the first playtest we realized that players were only using one, the frag grenade. No need for fancy sticky camera or whatever, the frag is doing the job. So it was kind of my fault. Like we were just thinking like, well, like frag grenade, which super agent like Sam Fisher would go on the field without a frag grenade? It's kind of retarded. And we're not going to make players buy. We had an economy system in the game, no microtransaction, but in the game. And we're not going to make players buy a frag grenade. It's super weird. It's part of the initial package. So here's the result we had with the first 3 playtests. You can see that on the whole single-player playthrough, players were using mainly just the frag grenade. Not the sticky camera, not the noisemaker, or not any of the other gadget. So that wasn't great. So we did 3 main things for that. Again, not huge things, but they've been proving to be super efficient. So first, in the menu, in the character customization page, when you select what gadget you're going to go in the mission with, we started by grouping the gadgets in categories. So that was not super complicated to do, and it helped us a lot. So all the gadgets that were dedicated to the stealth, we grouped that into our recon and distraction. So one thing. Then we had the gas grenade with the smoke, the tear gas, sleeping gas. Then we had the mine in charge, and then all the explosive gadgets. The second thing we did was to tell player which gadget can be used for which playstyle. Again, not crazy, but it helped us a lot. As you may know, in the game we have 3 playstyles. The Ghost playstyle, which is the perfect, nobody's seen me, nobody knows I'm here. The Panther playstyle, which is basically nobody knows I'm here, but I'm killing everybody. And the third one is the Assault playstyle, well, everybody knows I'm here and I'm killing everybody. So the example, for example, what we did with that is that in the character customization screen, we just specified that, oh, driver, you're on the driver, well, it's ideal for Ghost playstyle, for example. So if you want to increase your score in Ghost playstyle, use that, and etc. for the smoke grenade, for the Panther playstyle, and Proxy Mine for Assault playstyle. The third thing we did was to rework the initial loadout. Like as I said, it totally removed the frag grenade from it. To rework initial loadout, purchase progression, and pricing. So we removed the frag grenade from the initial loadout, we moved it down to the list as far as possible. Another thing we did, it was a bit dirty, like there was a lot of discussion about that, we increased the price of the frag grenade. We worked a lot with the economy designer on that to find the right balance, so you don't feel too much that we don't want you to go there. So there's been a lot of tweaking on that, but we're like, we gotta do something. So, and then the last thing we did is that we gave stealth gadgets more visibility by moving them up in the list, and also to encourage players to play more with them, and we just put their price a bit cheaper than the other gadgets. Again, a lot of tweaks there so that it doesn't seem too obvious. But on top of this, we also use another, what I call communication channel. It's like everything we can say to the player, we can use to talk to the player. So we used another one that we had at our disposal. It's like Charlie's, the voiceover from Charlie's that I talked to you about in my previous list.
Stop the blacklist, keep the hostages alive. In that order. That means gas grenades are top priority, with sticky cams for targeting.
So each time you were going in a mission, we were making you go through the character customization menu just before loading the mission to make sure that you're prepared and you didn't forget to take that gadget or that suit, etc., etc. And when we're doing that, when we're going to that menu just before going in a mission, we were playing a voiceover from Charlie, and fantasy was that, oh, Charlie is just giving you his last recommendation before you go in the mission. Again, another way to talk to player and to reinforce our message of you should instead. At the end, it looked kind of like this. Actually, this is taken from the game. You cannot see all the examples I've been talking about there, but you can see the recon and the classification of the gadgets. So recon and distraction, gas grenade, and then you have to scroll down to see the explosive grenades. You can see the little recommendation. Oh, that's ideal for Ghost play style. The little description there, and yeah, that's basically everything you can see here. So it worked pretty well actually for us. So if you remember the first playtest result that we have there, as we were implementing those solutions, you're going to see that the stats are changing progressively. So test 4 was slightly better, but not super convincing. Test 5, a bit better. Test 6, this is the first one we saw a big change really. And then to test 7, where really we were much more satisfied with the result. And those results, I didn't touch them, like I took them from our playtest. So we were super happy with that. Again, it has been not in one shot. That leads me to the last example for tonight, so the mark and execute problem. So mark and execute is not a complex feature, and if you played Conviction or Blacklist, it's very simple. Like you can execute multiple targets at once as long as you got the execute token, which you acquire by taking down enemies. So that's pretty simple. We even simplified a bunch of the rules for Blacklist. Like in Conviction, you had different marks depending on the type of gun you have. In Blacklist, you have 3 marks all the time. So we did those kind of simplifications. We had something, the second map was the second level of the game in the main SP campaign was dedicated to that. We sat down with the level designers and we were like, all the settings they've done were strongly inviting the players to use the mark and execute. But still, it wasn't really working. So on playtest 4, we had 18 players to this one, and we had an average of 6% of mark and execute kills. With the worst case being at 0.6% of mark and execute usage, that represents 2 kills on the entire SP campaign, which is 10 to 12 hours, depending on how you play. Or 8 hours if you play super well. The thing is that here are all the players and the stats per players. So you can see that we got 11 players that have a usage of 5% or less in the mark and execute. And although we know that mark and execute is just an extra tool that you have on top of your gadgets and every other feature that the game has, well, 11 players out of 18 that are using it 5% or less was pretty low compared to our expectations. So we kept digging into those playtest results. You can see that the clarity of the mark and execute was also an issue. We had a clarity range of 2.4 with almost 40% of players that are declaring it clearly, declaring it not clear at all. And if you include the 2 in that, it's almost 60% of the players that don't understand it. On top of that, if you keep digging in the results, we had some comments like it was often unclear as to when the enemy, when they walk away, was out of range for the execute part. Wasn't completely clear about how it recharged, couldn't use it a couple of times when I needed it. I still don't really understand it. It wasn't really explained in the tutorial, so although it was, but they didn't get it. So we sat down with our playtest manager, Daniel, and we parsing through those results and trying to understand what's wrong in our initial tutorial. We started to discover that basically we needed to connect the UI and the mark and execute rule better, because we had everything in the interface that was there. I was telling players, but just nobody was seeing it. So we had to do a better job at that in a limited amount of time. So here's what we did. We started by, so like I said, we didn't have a lot of time. So we said okay, we need clearly to get the attention of players to explain this. So we started to, players had to take cover in that position. They were forced to do it. And we were making them do cover to cover for the next position. The thing is that we also had some issues with a couple of players forgetting to take cover from the first map to the second map. So it was also a way to remind that to them, especially in that context. So you were doing your first cover and cover to cover. You were arriving in that position, and when you were arriving in that position, so with 3 enemies there, we were freezing the game completely, dimming the light everywhere except for the part we wanted to attract your attention on. So again, it's not crazy or revolutionary, but it's been proving to be very efficient. So we were displaying takedown and weapon kills, fill up your execute gauge, while making the execute gauge flashing. You can see there. This is really like the production document we used. And after that, after a couple of seconds of that, we were releasing the control and we were prompting you to perform a hand-to-hand takedown. As soon as you were performing that hand-to-hand takedown, we had the execute really popping and we were freezing it, again dimming the light on everything you don't need and telling you, oh, your gauge is now full and the executability is ready, while making the gauge flash for a couple of seconds. Then we were releasing the control again and we were making you mark the 2 guards. Remember that like in the comments, some players were not getting at all the concept of out of range or in range. So we displayed a prompt that had the mark icon in gray telling you, hey, enemies are out of range, like you need to get closer to execute. So then we were letting you perform your cover to cover move. We were not prompting you for that because we did it before, so don't want to be too heavy either, it's already heavy. And then when you were in position, when your marks were turning right, then we're telling, well, press Y to execute when enemies are in range while putting the red mark in the prompt. And then we're releasing, as soon as you had press Y, we're releasing the controller completely. But that's not all, because the thing is that we wanted to turn this feature into almost a reflex for player, like really something they don't even have to think too much of it to use it. So even if with that tutorial that we were writing, we had the chance to improve the learning of the feature, we had example that they were still forgetting some stuff from one map to another. So we did a couple of more things. We had a loading tutorial using one of the communication channel tutorial that I talked about. Pretty cheap to do this one. And also we picked up a spot in the map after that was not necessarily designed perfectly for mark and execute, but if you were a bit more advanced as a player, that you could, looking at the patrol, you could perform a nice mark and execute there. So we picked up a spot that was favorable for that. And we put a little, here a little side pop-up box that was just reminding you, without freezing anything, just on the side, hey, you can use RB to mark target and execute to neutralize multiple targets at once. We just put that. And it was actually super fun because I remember being at the playtest when we tested that, that after those changes, and I was watching 6 players, and like literally when that thing popped up at different time, but when it popped up, they perform and execute. And so at that moment, I remember Daniel looking at me, being like, "Oh, you're feeling powerful now." It's like, yeah, that was pretty good actually. That was pretty cool. So this leads us to playtest 6, so where we had 19 players. So we had an average of 15% mark and execute kills, the worst being 5% this time. It looks like this. You can see that out of the 19 players, we have only one who is at 5%. So this is, I consider that as a massive improvement compared to test 4. And if you look at it side by side, you can see that, well, basically there's more blue here, which is cool. And to us, it was acceptable to have those kind of stats for the marking execute being an extra tool for the player, so we were happy with that. Again, keeping digging into the playtest results, so we looked at the clarity and how it was understood by players. So we were at 3.9 on the clarity of wedge, which is plus 1.5 from the previous test. You can see that clearly it's been shifting on the completely clear side. It's not perfect, but it's much better than before. If you look at them like test 4 and test 6, it's like it's really you go home and you're at a much better happiness state than the test 4. And again, keeping digging into the results of player comments, I thought it was a great feature. It was definitely useful in tough situation. I especially liked that you had to earn it and it didn't have a limited use of it. Loved it. Just a couple of RB presses and then one and I was set. I like to mark targets in advance so I can keep track of where they are, even if I don't have execute available. So this one was actually great because it shows a deep understanding of the feature, so that was pretty cool. The thing is that we had to make sure that this is not just, sometimes you get players that are just better, so we had to make sure and follow up that it was just not luck. So test 7, although it was less good than test 6, you can see that we have 3 players that were at 5% or less, and we kept checking that, but those stats, like even if they moved a bit, they stayed in the same bracket mainly. We did one more thing that I was super happy about. You can see that even if the clarity was really up, we still have a bunch of red warnings in the not clear at all in the 1 and 2 scorings. And also there was a comment from a player that was really bugging me. It's like it wasn't completely clear about how it recharged and couldn't use it a couple of times when I needed it. So in the bad comment. So that was really an issue. So we sat down with I sat down with our lead gameplay programmer, Michael, and we come up with that idea of having like an error protection systemic center tutorial text, something like that. And the idea with that is that when you were pressing Y and you had nobody marked, well, the text was just, the game was just showing you a prompt telling you RB to mark targets. And then if you had marked target, but you didn't have the execute token and you were pressing Y, the game was telling you, oh, you need to get some enemies down before being able to have the token. And so we did that for every possible errors you could do while trying to use the system. And that was something completely systemic that was happening in the game as you're making mistakes, if you're making mistakes. So the thing that it got me thinking after all that passed and while we were shipping the game towards the end, it's like every players learn differently, and it's not when you're watching players in the playtest lab and see how they interact with your game. It's like it's really like kind of like in a classroom. I've never been a teacher, but that's from what my school years, what I remember from my school years. It's like you got the guy texting in the back, you got the other ones looking at the camera, you got the other ones sending papers with although you don't send paper, I guess now you send text message, but like, it's really that, and to get, when you're saying something important about how to play your games to players, they might be doing something completely different. You see it even in playtests, some of them are just putting back the chair, or just putting the controller down and going to get some water while the tutorial is playing. So it's really wild. So everybody learns differently. And the thing is that I think we need to adapt that as game developer to that. And to that we need to provide players with different by repeating the information, by having different communication channel and then repeating the information. So in conclusion, it's like, I would say that the most important thing is like, don't neglect the beginning of the game. And in our case, again, I wouldn't say that it's the same for everybody, but it's something really that I would keep in mind strongly for the next games. It's beginning has to be about the core of the experience, like the really core of the experience. The second thing is to use playtest not only to identify a problem, but also to validate a solution. Super important. And then the big thing is to repeat information using different communication channels to help increase information retention with players. So you've seen what we've done with the mark and execute, and this is definitely something I would try to do again in the future in better ways. But for my future work, what I'd love to do is define those communication channels earlier instead of in a crisis situation. That's something I'd really like to include as part of the design. How we're going to explain all of that to players. To use them in a way that would provide what I call like safety learning nets. So if you missed one because you were checking your phone, well, it will repeat information in a different way. And some people might be more sensitive to audio cue than visual text or etc. So try to find as many different communication channels we can. And also at the end, more organic tutorial. Nobody was fan of the freezing thing on Splinter, but it turned out that with the time frame we had, this is the best thing we could do. In the future, I'd love to have more organic tutorials, like more in a Zelda way, or something that flows more naturally with the game, and you don't even notice that you're having a tutorial right now. Definitely something I'd like to do. If you want to continue the discussion or just follow me on Twitter, this is my Twitter name, super cool. And big shout out to the design team in Ubisoft Toronto. Those guys were amazing to work with. The entire studio is amazing to work with, but like those guys were awesome. And thank you so much for coming tonight.
We're almost done. We're this close to being done. But tell me, does anybody do anything this weekend?
Opening the cottage.
Opening the cottage. Anybody else? Hands up for opening the cottage. Hands up for Toe Jam. Oh, Toe Jam. Yeah, good. Oh, it's fewer than I thought, actually. So those of you who are going to Toe Jam this weekend, this might be your last, greatest, hottest chance to meet with your team members and figure out what you're actually doing. So that's very exciting. We have a short amount of time to mingle here. Remember, we'll be running events throughout the year, and we'd love to know the kind of stuff you want to see. So please fill out those surveys. Your friendly neighborhood IGDA Toronto chapter members will be collecting them. What else can I tell you? Thank our sponsors. I have a handy list here. One more time. Ubisoft Toronto provided 2 speakers this evening, you may have noticed, KPMG, and surveys, which is very nice of them. KPMG, George Brown College, City of Toronto, Emmanuel Ebdemon and his company Media's Law, Massive Damage, Big Viking Games, and the Academy of the Impossible. Give them one more round of applause. We're going to the Charlotte room, which is on Charlotte Street. We have a little bit of time to eat the snacks. It's kind of like a fiscal budget. If we don't eat all the snacks, they will provide fewer snacks next time. So please make sure you eat all the snacks. And I'll give one more shout out to the Hand-Eye Society. If you want to know when cool stuff is going on, they're doing an excellent job of keeping up an events calendar. So if you go to handeyeSociety.com any day of the week, this is such a fantastic community. We've got stuff going left and right and center and up and down, and there's a lot of cool stuff happening. That's the place to find out about it. So thanks for coming out tonight. Hope to see you at the Charlotte room on or after 9 o'clock, and we'll see you next time. Woo!